what a special way for us to close out 2025 and prepare for 2026 than these two esteemed guests that I have with me today, Michael Sneed and John Dugan. We're going to be talking a lot about wisdom today, especially human wisdom in an AI world and leading in the gray. And let me tell you, both of these distinguished executives and gentlemen understand a lot about this. So I'm excited to learn from them today. I know you will be too. For those who are joining us live, you can be a part of the conversation. Hop in the chat, ask your questions, provide comments. You're part of the show too. That's what makes this really, really fun. So to kick things off, Michael and John, welcome to both of you. Thank you for being on the Working Forward podcast.
Great to be here, Jason.
Well, thank you, Jason. Great to be here with my buddy, John Dugan.
Likewise.
Love it.
Absolutely. And we're going to have a lot of fun together today, guys, because this wisdom concept with AI, it's really important. It feels like every single day we're seeing more and more headlines with what does the future look like? What does work look like in the future? And so we're really excited to tap into that. But before we get into those meaty things, let's just have a little fun to help everyone get to know both of you a little bit more in terms of your background and some of your experiences, because those things no doubt are going to shape probably a lot of the insights and wisdom you share with us today. So Michael, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're up to.
Sure, Jason. So I'll just start from the beginning. John knows all this, but I actually grew up in the Midwest. So I'm a Chicagoan, born and bred, love the Cubs and love the Bears. And of course, I like the Eagles now too. I'm raised in the South Side of Chicago, went to Catholic schools my whole life, moved away to Minnesota for college, and then on to the Ivy League for my MBA. And it was there that I got the opportunity to start in corporate America and worked at Johnson & Johnson, the healthcare company, for 39 years, rising from a summer intern to member of the executive committee at J&J. And along the way, really my trade is in marketing. Started as a marketer and moved into general management. And J&J gave me the opportunity to understand corporate dynamics, but more importantly, just expose me to so many different worlds. I spent a lot of time in Asia, lived in Switzerland, and ran a number of Johnson & Johnson companies here in the U.S. and around the world. And following my career at J&J, I retired there about 3 years ago. I've always been a believer in service, and so I've really been focused on board work, both on the nonprofit side and the for-profit side, but really serving customers, which I did in my career, serving all sorts of different stakeholders. But as you talked about earlier, Jason, part of what I learned, hopefully, is just how to lead during different times, try and take advantage of some of the experience I've had, some of the wisdom I've gained. And so I try and do that for the boards and the organizations that I serve on today. And when I'm not doing that, I love to run, love to play golf. John and I are good golf buddies as well, and always trying to get better at something that you can never be perfect at, but it's a good pursuit. So that's what I've been up to.
I love that. Between the two of you, who typically is winning the golf matches? We got to ask that.
It's going to be Michael, because he plays about 4 times as much as I do on an annual basis.
See, did you hear that backhanded compliment?
Oh yeah.
That's only because he doesn't play as well that he's not as good as me. But,
that's true.
We'll see.
He's a very good player. He's very good.
John's a lot of fun. He's always improving. Always be improving. That's our motto, right?
That's true, without a doubt.
I love that. And John, how about you?
Yeah, so it's hard to follow up Michael's introduction, but Jason, so I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I'm a Philly kid all the way, obviously passionate sports fans. I'm a son of an iron worker and a homemaker who raised 5 kids in Northeast Philadelphia. I actually lived at one time in a bedroom with my brother and my grandmother. So pretty interesting times back then. I went to Catholic school similarly to Michael all through my childhood as well as adulthood. I graduated from LaSalle University, got a degree in accounting, and my grades weren't the greatest when I graduated. I think largely because I worked my way through school, probably worked about 35 hours a week and commuted, but ultimately found an entry-level position in a healthcare organization working as a staff accountant. Next thing you know, 35 years later, I spent my entire career in healthcare. So 9 of those years were in larger hospital systems in Philadelphia. And then I was recruited in 1993 at the time by Coopers & Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, to help them build a consulting practice to support not only their audit clients, but other clients throughout the Philadelphia area and then eventually nationally. I was at PwC for 26 years. I served as a partner for 20 of those years. I had a lot of different roles at PwC. And I will tell you, I think a lot of the key to those roles was just having some strong mentorship along the way that were pushing me to seek additional challenges. So I had market roles, national roles. Unlike Michael, I wasn't international in regards to experience, but I was certainly at the forefront of growing a sizable healthcare consulting practice. I retired pretty early in 2019 at the age of 55, which is pretty rare. And I had a lot of counseling around that and some discussions around what's a year of your life worth? And I thought about that because we'd planned for retirement and had enough, and what's enough, what's never really enough. But I also knew when I retired, I needed to be productive. And similar to Michael, I looked at giving back, right? And this is where I kind of made a pivot. I was always on hospital boards and health system boards through my term at PwC, but I went towards higher education in regards to my retirement life. So I served 5 years on the board of trustees at LaSalle University, ultimately left as the vice chair there. And parallel to that, I actually got an MBA online because I really wanted to see what type of advancements were happening in online offerings. I'm a CPA by trade. And then ultimately I was recruited to develop and design a new course offering at Johns Hopkins University in their school, in the Bloomberg School of Public Health, basically strategic planning. And I spent a fair amount of my career helping healthcare organizations go through strategic planning as well as M&A activities down the road. So I spend my time mostly today on some board work, some volunteer work, not as much golf, but I certainly do like to golf. Like to travel with my wife, and I've got 3 grown-up kids that also keep me busy with adult challenges. So it's great to be here.
Hey, Jason. So you might be wondering how John and I know.
Yeah. How did you two get connected?
Yeah. So we're both, you heard John's story, you heard mine, but we both ended up living in Newtown, Pennsylvania, which is a town that's in Bucks County, north of Philadelphia. And both of our sons actually played Little League baseball. And so we met kind of on the baseball field, and I immediately thought John is he's a wild man, but he's got the gift of gab. But he's also, and you're going to hear us talk more about, even though we have very different backgrounds and upbringing, we clearly had a sense of shared values, and really developed, I think, good trust with each other, and had the ability to have difficult conversations and a lot of fun times. And so, he's one of my closest friends because of our son's interest in baseball.
Likewise, and Jason will also add, in about a month, Michael and I and our sons will be playing baseball together down at the Phillies fantasy camp in Cleveland. So another good time to spend together.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So many shared interests in terms of, like, obviously the type of work that you've done and serving on boards and things like that, but also these personal interests. And I'll tell you, just hearing you both, I know that we're going to learn a tremendous amount today from your wisdom and experiences, because as the listeners could already hear, you've got it in spades, both of you. But also, I have a feeling on some of these topics, we may hear some different opinions on certain things, where one of you may think a certain thing of like, this is what I'm predicting, or I think is the best approach. And one of you may have a different opinion. And I love that. And that's what's going to be really helpful because, we called this session Leading in the Gray. And I think you both would probably agree. We're in a lot of gray right now, just a lot of uncertainty of things that are shaking up the world. So let's go ahead and start diving into the meat of the conversation with both of your experiences, particularly at the C-suite level and in your C-suite circles, and then also the board work. I'd love to hear from both of you. What are you hearing and seeing right now in those boardrooms with respect to artificial intelligence in organizations? Because I think there's a lot of stuff that maybe gets sensationalized sometimes. It's hard to decipher, the truth from falsehoods that are out there and get good information. So I'd love to hear directly from both of you, to the extent that you can share. What are some of the topics, conversations that are coming up in the boardrooms or your C-suite circles around AI? Michael, let's start with you.
Yeah, and look, John can weigh in too. It clearly is a topic because it is part of the zeitgeist of any conversation today, right? It's AI. It's short for God knows how many other things. Interestingly, I remember the first time I heard the term artificial intelligence was back in the 80s, believe it or not. So it has been around for a long, long time. It's kind of pierced the current environment in a big way, but this is something that's been going on for a long, long time. Companies, J&J, other companies have been dabbling in AI for literally decades. What I find to be interesting now, of course, is that it has grown to the point where you can actually see the impact on a day-to-day basis in these companies. It started with a lot of what we call IoT, the Internet of Things, smart devices, that led to the use of large language models in companies. You saw it a lot very early in the manufacturing side of things. I think the difference now is people are understanding the real power of it, for good or for bad, right? And we're grappling with that as a country, as a world. I think inside of companies, one, they're trying to get their arms around it. It's like a new technology. And, so whether that technology is going from horse and buggies to automobiles, or when the internet first got introduced, it's a technology that we have to embrace, but we've got to figure out the right way to do it and what it can mean for individuals and organizations. So I think companies are just still grappling with it, Jason. It is, it can be very scary, like most technologies are, to be honest. When you look at the history of any technology, generally people are quite afraid of new technology. That's really been the history. And it's only as you get more used to it, as you understand, hey, what it can be used for, how to use it, when to use it. So companies are getting educated on it, right, John? I've had, in the last month, we've had 2 different board presentations on different boards I'm on in terms of how they're using AI, what's it used for, what's the possibility. But we're still early, very, very early in the game, in my estimation, which is actually a good thing, because you want people weighing in. You want companies weighing in on how are they going to use the technology, what are the rules of the road, what's kind of off limits for us. It won't surprise you that a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to build it for themselves. They want to have their own guardrails. And we can talk about this later, but that then moves into, what is your culture like, and how is your culture going to embrace or not embrace AI? So it becomes a cultural question as much as anything, as much as a technology question. Wouldn't you agree, John?
Yeah, totally. And to add, I'm going to try to eliminate some of the consulting lingo, because consultants like to use buzzwords all the time: disruption, transformation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I do think the AI period that we are in right now is very similar to the beginning of the internet, right? There's a lot of unknown, but there is clearly a fair amount of capital investment being made by many organizations. You see all these data warehouses being built around the world in regards to the anticipation of knowledge transfer. I kind of take an holistic view of whether it's any large, big initiative that a company has gone through. It first starts with board level education and also board level alignment that this is a strategic imperative, right? So our current business, the way it's structured today, is very likely going to change. It is very likely going to be impacted by AI. And I can just imagine being, a travel agent 20 years ago, let alone an administrative assistant at PwC today, that's got their world completely upside down relative to the tools and the capabilities that are being brought forward by AI. But I think it starts with a level set in regards to the opportunity to enhance business, to enhance shareholder value, but also keep a very clear focus on talent, right? So at my firm for many years, people were our only asset. We were people. We were selling our people. We didn't have products per se. But if you look at 2020 and beyond, we made $1 billion plus investment into AI, and we are now looking at products and capabilities to augment, obviously, our people and their skills. But I think most organizations need to go through an assessment of what are their products, what are their services, what are their capabilities, and let's start really combing back what can be enhanced through AI.
Yeah.
And never keeping an eye off of the talent equation, because I think Michael kind of acknowledged there's a resistance to change, right? And if you think about it, there's a generational resistance to change. Michael and I are both in our 60s, and we're pretty progressive to change, right, Michael? We're pretty progressive to using technology, et cetera.
I like to think so. Like to think so, John.
We like to think so, but I guarantee you, there's many people at companies in their 50s and early 60s where they may be really thinking, boy, is this for me?
Is this for me? Do I really want to go down this road?
Yeah.
I like you, I would say you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You can choose how to use it, though.
That's right.
And you gotta get on the train and learn it, figure out what it's good for. Again, you just look at the internet. The internet, it's still the Wild West, but we've learned to kind of pick and choose.
Yeah.
Hey, what's it good for? What's it not good for? It's going to be the same thing, I think, when it comes to AI. Don't get me wrong. AI is so much more powerful than the internet.
Yes.
And, John and I were talking the other day. I mean, I use AI all the time now. I mean, I find it fascinating just to kind of, peck around and see what it can do. And it is amazing. It is absolutely amazing. But you still have to be grounded in education, as John said, but also understand, okay, what am I using it for? The first place, and John can speak to this, but the first place, of course, was in education. That was a big hoo-ha in terms of students, and are they going to use AI to cheat and all of that? And I remember when you could first use calculators in math class. Right? So you still they're great tools, but it's not a substitute for actually how you learn and the foundational learning that you're going to need in an AI world to ultimately be successful. In fact, I would posit that you need you need to have stronger communication skills. You need to have stronger leadership skills. You need to be more focused, as John said, on developing your people than before, to be honest. So there's actually a premium on what I would call the soft skills, because AI is actually going to be able to do a lot of the hard skills. that you might have done before, and maybe didn't feel like you needed to be a great manager or a great developer of people or a great communicator. Those skills are actually going to increase in value going forward, in my estimation.
Yeah, I think to be able to effectively present analysis that may have been done previously by humans, going through data and numbers and crunching, which will all be compiled relative to back office machines, so to speak, but to actually be able to take that information, synthesize it, create business value off of it, but going back to what you just stated, Michael, to be able to effectively present it and communicate it so it becomes actionable. To me, that's really important. I think the one other thing, Jason, going back to what are we seeing in boards, et cetera, there's certainly some momentum around having some established governance around AI. No different than various respective committees of the board, whether there's a finance and audit committee, a quality committee, a compliance committee, and so on. There quite often may be an ad hoc committee being identified relative to AI, and quite often it's led by the chair and vice chairs, where they're engaging with the CEO to really take an inventory of what we're currently doing from a business process perspective, but to really ask that executive team to develop that transition roadmap. What's going to be impacted? What are the capital investments needed? What should we expect to see in OpEx? But more importantly, what's the return on investment? And I will tell you, what I'm hearing right now, I get the question quite often, is it best to be first in, or do you wait? Do you wait? I mean, think about it, Michael, with Y2K and ICD-10 and other healthcare large agendas. Everybody was like, we need to bring in the consultants. We need to bring in there. We need to get organized. And it may not have been the best to be first in. It might have been best to just kind of wait and see and let some other people make some mistakes.
Not so fast.
Now, don't get me wrong. You really do want to understand what your competitors are doing and what your industry or sector is doing relative to those opportunities. But it may not always be the best to lean in as aggressively as possible. And this is where your people come in. Your people that are working. And most importantly, you need to protect your, I'll call it customer-facing people, most importantly through this transition, but learn from your people relative to also the speed and the pace at which your organization can go.
I think if you're in this time as we are, I think companies are smart to be placing a lot of small bets. But to go all in on one thing right now, there's just too much stuff out there. So John said, be smart enough to know the landscape of all the things, place a lot of small bets that most of these things are going to blow up, quite honestly. And you'll know early on which ones are going to stick and which ones are, okay, glad we didn't put more money down that rat hole. So that's probably the best approach I think companies can take today.
Jason, I'll give you a simple example of what I experienced on a personal level as a customer. I think one of the large technology companies in the S&P is going to post earnings this evening. And I think about my encounters at hospitals and physician offices and where they've transitioned from paper to electronic health records to documenting as you're actually going through your encounter. And believe it or not, my most recent patient encounter at my physician office, there was no dictation. It was all recorded.
All ambient listening.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So our conversation back and forth, his review of my blood tests, my results, his review of my history, my current physical, etc. And I said, hey, why aren't you in the Epic system or whatever system you're using? Type in. He goes, oh no, we've just gone through an upgrade, and it's recording everything, and it's even doing a first cut path at assigning the CPT codes for billing, right? So it's literally taking out some processes that may have been done downstream to be much more enhanced with the patient experience. So if you think about that, that doctor's probably able to see a lot more patients
Yeah.
relative to, patient throughput.
The quality of the interaction goes up.
Quality
Right.
interaction goes up.
Yeah.
The reliability of the information, right, is there.
Exactly.
All the various natural language processing tools. And then you go on the far back end. There used to be hospitals that used to have boatloads, and I had them in the consulting team of staff that would code all these medical records. Well, I mean, we're talking significant funds to put towards those resources, and now you got to be more strategic in how they're utilized and playing much more upstream relative to maybe impacting your contract rates versus just coding medical records.
But think about that, John. Think about that example, and you spend that to just a salesperson or someone who deals with a customer.
Yes.
Now you have the ability to have all that information. Like we've all had the experience of calling some company and you're frustrated because something doesn't work. But now if that person has access to all the previous conversations and knows you more, it becomes less transactional and more relational.
Yeah.
And then when you have a good relationship with a company, what do? You tend to stay with that company.
You certainly do.
Be more loyal.
You trust that brand.
Exactly. A lot of good things. So but again, these are all things that have to be proven, but in some cases, to John's example on the hospital, that's happening today.
Yes.
I know at Jefferson, we've got 10,000 physicians who already they all do ambient listening. And that should make for a better patient experience. So lots of good things there.
So I heard a lot of emphasis on communication. It was really important. The small bets, the examples that you gave are perfect. I got a couple stories here to tie in that I think tie into this really well too.
Great.
The first one is John, you were talking about, like, it's not always great to be the first one out there. And so taking a cautious approach, trying to learn, placing the small bets, as you put it, Michael. I remember back in 2012, as I helped stand up the first entrepreneurial venture I had with a business partner was a technology company. And I still remember something an investor said to us. And it was when we were getting ready to go to market, we had the MVP ready. He said, do you want to be first or do you want to be best?
Yeah.
And my response was both. And he laughed at me and he goes, you don't get to do that. You don't understand. Like it's a choice here. And that really stuck with me. And I tell you, I understood it then, the wisdom that he was imparting to me, and I saw it come out to play in terms of software development then. I have to imagine now with what you've just shared that it's even more important that just because you can go faster, you could get there before everybody else, doesn't necessarily always mean that you should. That if you take more of a cautious approach, place those small bets, as you mentioned, Michael, test and iterate before making any large sweeping changes of some kind, that from a sustainability standpoint of getting to where you want to be or need to be for your customers, for your internal stakeholders, that probably for the most part, that's going to be a better approach to be best in the long run than to just jump in. One company that comes to mind, I know they got a lot of headlines for this, and I've brought them up in several episodes, but Klarna, which is a financing company, they made a lot of headlines because they decided to go the opposite direction, and was, the way we're going to learn is we're going to hop in and we're going to figure it out. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go full tilt agents, AI agents for customer success, customer support. And so they did that. And the last I saw, I think it ended up being, at least to a certain degree, a mea culpa, where they started having to bring back some of their folks, to support that. And it was oh shoot, we thought we were ready. We thought we understood this. We thought we knew the bet we were replacing. And it ended up not making for a good experience for our customers and wasn't good for us as a company. And so they kind of had to do an about face. So I think there's a lot of wisdom there that you just shared, that sometimes not sometimes, most of the time probably, it pays to still, just because things are going faster around you, just because the technology can develop faster, doesn't necessarily mean that you should make faster decisions, or maybe you just speed up your process of placing those bets and testing and iterating, but not just jumping all the way to the other end, because then that could be a massive risk that has a lot of cost to it, both internally and externally.
One-
Any
one-
reactions to that?
100%, Jason. I mean, it's interesting. The common narrative in the culture today is that everything you see was totally successful and they got it right the first time. And the reality is that's not the case. And most of the stuff that gets done is on the iteration of a lot of other earlier failures. You look at the Apple iPhone. That's like one of the classic examples. They were by far not even close to being the first, but they learned from their competitors in terms of what they were doing, iterated, and most importantly, and I find this to be really important, they had the ability to understand how to scale so they could be sustainable. A lot of things are flash in the pan. As a society, we are kind of taught to look at the shiny new object, and you forget that there's a lot of roadkill on the side of the highway. And people don't remember that. They don't think about it, but it's really the companies and people, because the people are behind companies, that say, hey, hold on, let's take it a little bit slow. Let's be really, really, really fast to kill things, right? Look at stuff, experiment, doesn't work, you move on. But like your example, Jason, that was a great question, because you can't be both. You can't be first and best. It rarely happens. It's always about iterative. And history will tell you that. And some of us have got a lot of I've got a lot of stories where I wanted to be first on certain things, and I thought it was a great technology, and it didn't quite have all the things we needed, and they're failures. So you're going to have a few of those when you spend as long a time as I did in business. That's for sure.
I would just add, stepping back and looking at high value activities usually correlates to high touch. Low value could be lower touch, and that's probably your pilots for your opportunities to have perhaps the least resistance relative to change. You may lose a component of your workforce that's doing, I'll call it, very repetitive, low value work that may be augmented by AI. But we've all experienced that situation where we're on the phone just trying to get through to somebody, and then we have to hear the first 8 prompts, and we're like, give me a human. It's all you want is to speak with a human. And then you realize you're going, wow. And that's even being used with one of my luxury car dealerships. Like, oh boy. And Michael and I will tell you, we're very, very brand focused, right? And we're focused on experiential outcomes, right? Because quite often the experience wins the day. It wins the day. That human connection, they can be augmented with technology, having all your information, but the ability to connect with someone and feel good about it, I guess what? You'd be willing to pay more for that, right? Relative to whatever the service is. So that is the concern about jumping all in and not having some appropriate caution.
We're having some conversations here at home, my wife and I. So those who typically tune into the show, that we have 4 sons at home. Rachel and I do. The oldest is 12. He's starting to ask some really interesting questions about work and what's it going to look like once he's out of high school. What jobs are going to be available? What skills? Well, it kind of came to a head this week, guys. I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because my wife and I, we had a conversation this week that we weren't ready for when it came to our oldest and artificial intelligence, right? And so here's what was going on. My wife was like, hey, I've noticed that Duke is our oldest son's name. He's using Canva, and he's using Canva to create a lot of logos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But he's saying, look at what I created. And he really is just giving like a couple prompts, like, hey, make a dolphin that's coming out of the water and call the team the Dolphins or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's saying, like, look at my work. And so my wife is like, I think it's time you have the talk with Duke. And I'm like, the talk? I'm like, I'm going through my head. I'm like, we've had the birds and bees talk. Okay. All right. Let's see. What else is there to talk? And she's like, no, she's like AI. You need to be talking with him about AI. She's like, don't you talk about this stuff all the time? I'm like, yes, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to start talking with my 12-year-old about what it's going to look like after high school. Well, the reason I bring that story up is it really started to unfold. And I was like, I wonder how many of these kind of conversations that I'm going to be having with my 12-year-old son, to a certain extent, if you extrapolate that, are the types of conversations we may be having in business as we reskill or upskill a lot of our talent, all of us, as we're stepping up our game and trying to understand AI and how to use it. And it just got me to thinking about, okay, how would I go about communicating what artificial intelligence is to my 12-year-old son, how to use it, what are the do's and don'ts. Don't take credit for things that it may be creating on your own. Another lesson that we talked about was it's really important for you. And I think, Michael, you talked about this. You need to be striving and trying and putting in effort and learning and developing yourself before just stepping in and having it give you a finished product of some kind, right? Because otherwise you're going to atrophy if you aren't using your brain and developing those human skills, especially around communication and problem solving, as you were talking about. It's a tool that's really easy to just hop in and kind of like give that agency over to it to do for you.
Yes.
Which I think is the dangerous thing. And so I just brought that up because it was something this week when it was like, it's time to have the AI talk with our 12-year-old. I was like, I get to talk with some of the most brilliant people in the world like you two on this. And I still am like, I'm not exactly sure how to have this conversation with him, but I'm sure this is probably what a lot of executives and leaders inside companies are also wrestling with in terms of how to create governance, how to create norms, how to create good citizenship in terms of this is how we use it, this is how we don't. These are the parameters we're putting around it in terms of what we're going to do. This is, when we know we're going to build our own versus use another one from another company. Like there has to be so much wisdom that comes from that. So I guess all of that to say, guys, like, where do we go from here with those conversations?
Yeah, I don't envy like John and I, we've got older kids. My youngest is 23. I don't envy parents who've got 12-year-olds like you do, because like you said, they've got access to all this technology, but they probably don't even, like you said, they think it's fun and cool, but you do need to have the talk about, hey, before we delve into AI, let's, in my words, let's talk about the values that we have as a family. Let's talk about, because the companies do the same thing. And most good companies have a set of values, they got principles, whatever. And that conversation fits first and foremost into the context of what those values are. And then from there, you can have certain rules, you have behaviors. These are all the components of what I would just call culture, right? So what is the AI culture that we want to have? But it starts with, what are the values? What are the values of my family? What are the values of my company when it comes to how am I going to learn? How am I going to use it? Where are the guidelines? I mean, we need all those things. And the one thing I would say, the one thing I give the U.S. credit for a lot, but one of the things I think people have learned is that we probably didn't have these conversations when the internet first started. And in hindsight, I think a lot of people are, hey, we probably needed to have those conversations. So having had that experience, I hope we build upon that and go, hey, what did we miss in 1997 and 98, 99? Let's make sure we don't make the same mistake when it comes to AI. And I do think it starts with some of those conversations that I just mentioned.
I think to add, Jason, you're going down a path with your young children that, believe it or not, many colleges and universities are dealing with very heavily direct on what is their role and what is their responsibility in providing education, right? And the traditional four-year degree, the MBA, et cetera. All those things are being much more closely evaluated. I'll give a shout out to my alma mater, high school, right? So I went to a Catholic preparatory high school in Northeast Philadelphia that looked at its demographics and where their needs were from a careers perspective and opportunity, and they pivoted to trades. So they not only have a college preparatory track, but they've built a career pathways academy where they're developing welders, automotive technicians, and HVAC personnel. And they just graduated their first class of welders, I believe, a year ago, with starting salaries in the 70s, right? Coming out at 17 years old, right? So I think taking a step back and looking at, you'll see all the studies out there. You can just do a little chat GPT, what are going to be the top 25 careers in a post-AI world, et cetera. We won't go through that today, but I step back and I look at my own career, probably Michael's own career and others, and there's like 3 things that I think are really important, whether we're in an AI world or not. I was always a believer you needed to be a subject matter expert in something.
Yes.
In something.
What are you going to be known for?
And trust me, at the firm, I had 2 or 3 of those somethings, and nobody was better than me. And I made sure of it, right? So whether it was
that's good
Medicare reimbursement, to hospital M&A, to hospital revenue cycle, whatever those 2 or 3 things, I was going to be the best at that subject. So, but then agility. Michael just explained he worked in, I couldn't tell you how many countries, but it certainly demonstrated his ability to be agile, his willingness to take on different operating and business units and be successful and grow. And then finally, this is going back to Michael's commentary on family values and culture. I kind of collapse it all into emotional intelligence, right? And that's certainly supported by the family. It should be supported by the community, as well as what we're learning in colleges and universities as we're putting our kids through those programs. But if you're able to kind of demonstrate a heavy focus on those 3, whether it's an AI world or not, you'll be okay. I think you'll be okay.
And I think, to Jason, you and your family and all families out there, I think most of the jobs that our kids are going to have probably haven't been invented yet.
Right.
So you can't predict what those are going to be. So to John's point, you just got to make sure you have the foundations in place in terms of emotional intelligence, in terms of your values, in terms of your mission statement. I mean, I joke, John knows this. I mean, we have a mission value statement for my family. And that's important because you're trying to teach kids, your kids certain values. You're trying to give them the opportunity to make good judgment. One of the things, not to digress, but John knows this. So I have 3 kids, girl, boy, girl. And one of the things long time ago when they were just starting to be teenagers and, going out with their own friends, and I would say to my wife, okay, the last thing I want them to hear is my voice before they leave that door. And the last thing I want them to hear is make good choices. I used to say, make good choices, make good choices. I wanted that to be in their head when they're going to do all the things we know kids do and all the temptations and all the peer pressure. And it's even, again, with AI, it's going to be there, multiple, times 10. The idea of learning how to make good choices will be critical, I think even more critical in an AI world than it certainly was for us. I mean, our choices were relatively limited when we were growing up, but now kids have a lot of choices, so make good choices.
The other thing I'll add to that, Michael, your family mission statement, you and I are both blessed that we worked for very large, forward-thinking organizations that really focused, in your case, on the credo, in our case, on PwC's purpose statement, right? So the fact is, there are a lot of companies that maybe this is an opportunity to take a refresh.
Yes.
Of their mission, of their purpose statement, of the relevance of it. Do they need a refresh of their values, right? Relative to aligning everybody together from a workforce perspective. But, Jason, when we were talking in anticipation of this podcast, it was kind of like Yeah, Michael and I come from two of the very top organizations in the space that invest in people, in development, and are very laser focused on their purpose. So not many people can say that, right? And we benefited from that. And that's something, as you just saw with Michael, he's cascaded down to his family with his own family mission statement. I'm now thinking, once again, I'm behind him in golf, and I think I need to create a family mission statement.
You and me both.
Maybe I'll just borrow PwC's build trust in society and solve
There you
important
go.
problems. So there we go. Maybe that's what my kids need to do.
All good, John.
I love that. But it's so true. Like, and it really is incredible. I'm sure the conversations you have, how many times, whether it's personal or professional, things come back to identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Values, mission, purpose, the things that ground us, that help us live out wisdom, that give us pause, to make us think deeply before we take action on something.
Yes.
How much more important those things are. And I love these additional things you shared too, John: subject matter expertise, agility, emotional intelligence, and then the things you were sharing, Michael, around understanding your values, the ability to communicate with clarity. Like, these things that we notice them in really well-developed human beings, and we're like, when that person speaks or they have something to share, I really perk up and listen because they're wise, because I can tell by the way that they comport themselves, the way that they treat others, the way that they lead, the way that they go about making decisions. Those things have always been important, but it feels like, my God, like where we are now and where we're headed in the future, it's going to be even more important that we follow that type of leadership, but also develop it. Because if it's something that we give more agency over to AI and outsource some of, quote unquote, the thinking or some of the decision making on things, we've got to make sure we're using judgment on what we're allowing it to contribute toward, what we're allowing it to have a part in decision making process, and the things that we won't. And it's hard to get clarity on those things if you haven't established together as a family unit, as a community, as a school, as a company, as a nonprofit, what those kind of ground rules are, those parameters within how you're going to operate and think and interact with artificial intelligence. You know, there was a futurist many years ago, Alfred Toffler, who wrote a book, and he kind of coined the term future shock.
Right.
And something he shared with me that'll bring up this conversation, I'd love your reaction to it in terms of what it means for today, is he said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read and write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Yes.
And that has really started to hit home for me, and especially this week, preparing for this conversation. And then when my wife was like, it's time for you to have the talk, the AI talk with our son, I was like, this is coming into play here, where I've got to impart, and I've got to start showing him and explain to him how I'm currently living this out, in terms of I'm approaching the work that I do in a very different way than I did a year ago. And here's why, and here's how I'm incorporating AI into some of the things I do. I think a lot of times, many of us, we probably take for granted things are going so fast. We learn how to do things, that we're keeping up with the speed of it. But sharing with others is such an important part of learning and helping them develop and grow, and maybe not make the same mistakes that you did. That I think it can be easy to get in those silos and just kind of get in a vacuum with yourself and your AI chatbot, and not, be having these crucial conversations together of, well, this is what I've learned. This is what I wouldn't do with it. And sharpening one another that way too. Thoughts or reactions to any of those things?
Yeah, 100%, Jason. As you were talking about that, it reminds me of, I had a economics professor in college, and the one thing I remember him saying is, just because you're graduating doesn't mean that you need to stop learning. And it always stuck with me. And there's been a lot of variations on that around just, always refreshing, your knowledge, or being naturally curious about things. I do think that sometimes people feel like your life is one, linear progression, when in fact it's not. It's a constant recircling of what you've done, and also how do you become smarter from the things that you have experienced? And to your point, sharing that with others so that you can either confirm, yeah, that was a really stupid thing I did at the time, and I'm better for it, and I'm going to share it with you as to why you can learn from me. But more importantly, it's this mindset, I think, of just always be learning, never assume that that all you've learned is all you need to learn. It's like the old story about the patent office back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where the head of the U.S. Patent Office wanted to close the department because he had determined that everything that needed to be invented was invented, and there was going to be no more need for patents. That's a true story, by the way. And of course, it's silly now, but it was around that idea of, hey, I know everything and nothing else can happen, when in fact, most of what we know is a very, very small piece of what we ultimately can know. So the notion of always learning, always being curious, educating yourself, it's incredibly satisfying, by the way, to always be doing that. And it's equally as satisfying to share it with others, I find.
Yeah, and I'd say echo all of Michael's thoughts. The couple things I'd add: mentorship. It's a responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's a responsibility for every leader in an organization to mentor talent, particularly talent that may be lost, may look for some further help and direction and guidance. I am really concerned about the current workforce environment. Coming off of the pandemic, seeing all the noise, and then you've got all the resistance into back to office, right? Mindsets where there's a resistance from going back to 1 day to now 3 days to whatever it is. I am concerned that there's a generation of workforce that's not getting the hallway conversation, the hallway guidance, the mentorship conversation to pick me up. And not only that, when people are surrounding themselves in teams, it gives the leaders opportunities not only to reward success, celebrate success, but what I found more importantly over my career, particularly my time spent at PwC, where you're going out and you're trying to win work, you're winning work and showing up as a team every day. And I think some of the most rewarding professional development opportunities I've had with my staff were celebrating losses, failures, because they were all incredible efforts, even to lose.
Yeah, because
right?
you can learn a lot.
We learned a lot from losses, right? So I think I'm concerned about that atmosphere that we have today that's becoming so much more I use the word automated.
Well, it's more transactional. I mean, what you're talking about, John, is, you're talking about how do you build culture in an AI world? Mm-hmm. How do you build trust? The one thing I will say, and I agree with everything John said in terms of getting together more as an office. But one thing I would say, I remember working through the pandemic, mm-hmm. and having this new technology called Zoom, which we're using some version of that today. The one thing I remember talking to a lot of our younger people is they felt it was actually a benefit because they felt they were much more on an even plane with their supervisors or superiors. They felt they could be heard, particularly if you're a woman, particularly if you weren't white. This was actually a benefit that now I can have an equal voice. So like anything, you have to figure out the right balance of it. But it did provide people a voice where, and I'll be honest, there were people I talked to on Zoom that I would never have gotten a chance to talk to in the old world, where they were several layers down. I didn't know their name, right? Or they're in a country that I hadn't visited. And now through the magic of technology, I got to hear them. And most times I was like, wow, they're pretty impressive. So I think it's finding that amalgam that allows for that democratization of people in a way that they can feel more equal, at the same time still building that culture and that trust and those values that allow you to come together as a team. And I don't know if we've cracked the code on that, and probably need to in an AI world.
And no one wants to come to the office if they're not going to be engaged.
That's right. That's why people push back, right? That's why these folks push back. It's like, well, why do I need to be there? I'm not doing anything. So it actually is incumbent upon companies.
That's right.
Actually make it worth their while to come to the office.
That's why you have to take 1 hour conference calls and bring them down to 25 minutes. And you need to make sure that the purpose of those type of conference calls and meetings are in fact engagement, debate, right?
And if I know I'm going to be asked to engage, I'm going to be asked a point of view. Okay, I'm going to show up. I'm going to be ready. Yes. If I'm not going to do that, then what's the point of being there? Absolutely. Right? I can just sit behind my computer and do my work.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So it's why I go back earlier. It's why learning how to be a leader, learning how to be a manager in this environment is even more critical, because you've got to win the hearts and minds of your associates, of your employees, in a way that you didn't have to before, because they were there, they didn't have a choice. No, they got choices. So what are you going to do to make yourself stand out? What are you going to do to be that leader that people want to be around?
Yes.
That's an important nuance to where we are today in today's world.
With all the change that we've been talking about so far, I got to ask this. With your wisdom and experiences, what have been maybe one thing, especially maybe it's a current thing with AI, where you're like, oh, I had to unlearn this, or I'm rethinking my schema and my understanding on this particular type of topic or this type of thing? Is there anything that comes to mind to you where you've been like, oh, this kind of made me think again here recently? Kind of like my example of like, oh, yeah, I should probably chat with my son about AI in the future and how to approach schoolwork. That was one for me where it's like, don't just take for granted that like the school's going to teach him those things. Like, as an active, caring, loving father, I should also have a conversation and take him into my world of like, this is how I'm using it. This is how I'm not using it. And here's why. And here are my values and how they come into play around this. That's been one for me. And it was echoed today with your sentiments, even in terms of how we approach it in business. Are there any unlearnings or relearnings that come to mind for you that maybe have come up here recently?
Well, I will out myself with a more of a lighthearted example, but I think one of the downsides for me, or for John, I would say, so I'll just say for me, is I feel like I know a lot about a lot of things, right? So one of the things that I often say is often right, sometimes wrong, never in doubt. And and one of the things that AI has shown me is that, I'm more wrong than I'd like to be in terms of, and my wife is very, very quick to show that to me, that so I would say it's not unlearning, but it's caused me to be more humble and to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. Maybe the things that I hear, the noise, is I've taken it as gospel, as opposed to doing more of my own research, to your point, to become more of an informed consumer, an informed citizen, an expert at whatever. There are a lot of things that I probably, in the narrative talk in my head, I've taken it as and turned it into gospel and truth. And with AI, you can quickly check to see if that's in fact the case. So it's caused me to say a lot more, Jason, than I used to. It's caused me to say, yeah, you could be right. I would never say that before. It's like, you could be right. Let me find out more. So it's been more humbling. I think you have to treat AI as a humbling experience, because I think if you're like John or myself, you've had we've been blessed with a great amount of success. We do have a lot of knowledge, but sometimes that can plant you in a place that you're unwilling to move from until you find out more information. And AI gives you the ability to find out a lot more information. And some of it may be uncomfortable, quite honestly, in terms of some of your assumptions. It also, for me, in the more serious side of things, but it's allowed me to dig deeper in certain topics to understand how they developed into what they are today. What's the motivation for certain people to do certain things, or certain countries, or certain companies? Where did that come from? Before, you didn't have any, you either had to spend your time really delving into research libraries to figure some of these things out. Now it's all out there. So it puts a lot more responsibility, though, I think, on you as an individual to say, okay, I'm really going to take it upon myself to learn a lot more, so I can be more informed and be a better steward of what the actual evidence and information is out there.
That's good, Michael. How about you, John?
Well, first of all, I'd add, and I think where Michael's going relative to sources of truth, unfortunately, in all aspects of life, there's bias. So it's really hard to find sources of truth. So I think it's imperative for everyone to maybe cast a wider net of information that they've looked at in the past and expand it, because facts are facts, but facts could also be misleading, right? Depending upon who's the purpose and what it's being used for, et cetera. But I do think AI provides so many ways to kind of try to attempt to validate information. I go back to also, as we were just having this conversation, I was listening. I'm going, man, this reminds me of a song. So there's a song that I like, and I'm not going to sing. Michael knows I like to sing.
He does like to sing, Jason.
There's a song by Cat Stevens, Father and Son, and going back to Truce, right? And
Cats in the Cradle.
Oh, no, not Cats in the Cradle. Father and Son. This is where you have the two perspectives, right? Okay. It's not time to make a change, right? So you have a father that's really trying to impart wisdom on his son. He knows exactly the journey. Find a girl, settle down, get married. Life's not that complicated. And then you hear the son's perspective of the song. And he's like, you know what? From the time I was born, I was ordered to listen. Never got a chance to speak. Never got a chance to really develop a rapport with his father, who he probably loved dearly. But it just showed you two completely different perspectives. Yeah. The father thought he was a loving dad, raised him well, provided great mentorship, blah, blah, blah. And the son's like, wow, I grew up in an environment where I really wasn't able to express my feelings. And I think you can carry that to the workforce. So I really think, and it goes back to even my conversations of in person and whether you do it in Zoom, et cetera, leaders have an opportunity, particularly with all the noise around AI, just to be better listeners, just to really listen to our staff and listen to our people. Because if we're not spending that time soliciting those inputs, and unfortunately, we're in a world today where, we do annual reviews. It's annual review system. Let's go into the system. Let's type up our 3 paragraphs, and then let's hand it off to HR. Let's have a little quick summary. And the next thing you know, 5% raise in this bonus. Really impersonal. And that's where it seems to be moving. So how can we do a better job just listening to our people and listening to the concerns that they have?
Well, I knew today that there was going to be a tremendous amount of wisdom that you both shared, but I tell you, I'm going to have to Venmo you some money for this therapy session. I feel like you both have really helped to go down this rabbit hole with me of having young kids and how to have this conversation, how to be a better dad. That was a beautiful tie-in, John, with the song. And seriously, like, that is good perspective to think about. And it's a good reminder for me of, I do tend to be that type of dad that tends to be like, oh, you're coming to me for an answer? Here, I'll give you the answer real quick.
Yeah,
right.
There you go. Because we have 4 kids, it's like, let me get to the quickest, fastest, most efficient way. but not realizing that there's opportunities I may be robbing of him for him to strive or maybe struggle through it a little bit.
Mhm.
And instead ask a reflective question like, well, what do you think?
Right.
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 You know, go try. And I think from what we've shared today, I hope what leaders and anyone, whatever your walk of life is, as you're listening to this episode, these human skills we keep talking about of understanding how to communicate, how to ask the right questions, those have always been tremendously important in human development. But it's even more so now that we have competing technology that makes it really easy and convenient for us to give agency to outsource thinking and development to it, to do it for us. And that is such a slippery slope. And it gives cause for all of us to spend time reflective each day and thinking well and thinking deeply on how we're using AI and how we're not using it, and what we don't want to give it agency or control over. And what you just shared is a good reminder for me as a dad that I don't need to do the same thing to my son. I don't need to become the AI for my son and just giving answers. Like he comes over, like he's typing on me, give me an answer for this. And then I just spit it out like, no, I need to ask a reflective question and let him think through it and develop it. So that was a good reminder for me. I told you both that the time was going to go by pretty quickly, and it certainly has.
It
But
has.
before we
It
get
has,
ready to wrap up,
we've enjoyed it.
it's been a blast. I've got to ask you this. We've covered a lot together today, but is there something we haven't covered yet as we get ready to wrap up that's on your heart or your mind that you wanted to cover today that we should before we get ready to wrap up? Michael, let's start with you.
And look, we can talk more maybe about this more further in another podcast, but I really want people to understand how culture permeates everything we talk about. Culture is, I was thinking about this morning, so I was getting ready for this. You know, culture is really just, it's a combination, we talked a little bit, it's a combination of your values, and whether that's your personal values, your community, your family, your company. From there come rules that align with your values. But then the secret sauce is around behaviors. And behaviors that are aligned with that culture, then you have a very strong culture. If you have behaviors that don't fit the culture, then that causes a lot of dissonance. So whether it's in your family, if you see behaviors that don't align, but it's really being explicit about what those values and rules are and the behaviors you expect that then give you the impact that you want in the culture around it. And as we think about AI, I can't help but believe it's going to be tied to values and behaviors and rules that will ultimately drive what we want as the AI culture for your family, Jason, for companies, for society at large. So that's a lot to unpack, and we can talk about it more, but I do feel like the culture piece is so important. I think it's one of the biggest issues we have as a country today is we don't spend enough time understanding all the various cultures we have in the US. How are those cultures defined in terms of their values? What behaviors do they exhibit? And how do we live with multiple cultures in this grand experiment that we call the United States of America?
And how about you, John?
Wow, how do I follow that one from my friend?
Right.
So, yeah, I'll go back to just a little discussion I had around developing subject matter expertise, being able to demonstrate agility, and investing yourself on emotional intelligence. And I wrap that all up in the theme that everyone who's listening to this, you're responsible for your own personal brand. And those three are big components of your own personal brand. And hopefully you're getting strong mentorship and guidance, whether it's through family, through coworkers, superiors, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you own your personal brand, and your brand may be different from somebody else's, and you need to respect that as well. And I think the better that we can come together to understand the uniquenesses of each other's personal brands and what's really important to them. And I think it goes back to Michael's commentary on cultures, right? I think the more you can spend some time understanding your personal brand, the better off we're going to be, whether it's with AI or not. You have your own deal breakers, right? You know, there are things that you are not going to do. And that's your own internal ethics engine that kind of operates. These are deal breakers. I'm not going to do this, whether I'm asked to or not. And I'm going to explain to the organization why. So I think there's an opportunity further on down the road to talk about the process of discovering your personal brand, discovering your interests, discovering what's important to you to make you a better professional, and hopefully being developed into a leader if that's what you aspire to be. But sometimes I struggle with closing, but that would be it. Focusing on your personal brand, seeing how it may need to be refreshed, similar to how corporations need to potentially step back and look at their purpose, particularly in a rapidly changing world.
That's really good. So I love the unification focus, Michael, from you that you talked about. We're going to have to make that another episode because, like you said, that really is a full episode, because what we've already seen with AI so far, there are tremendous amount of pros, but some of the cons you can already see with the bias and things is it can be very divisive in terms of how it's used or even the output you get from it. And certainly it can be like throwing gasoline on a fire in terms of not respecting one another, or, you know, taking perspective to think through other people's cultures and values. So absolutely, that should be another one we should talk about another time. And then also to yours, John, of this idea of personal brand, of identity, and making yourself. Someone shared with me one time, I thought it was really smart, saying that they said, go make yourself, because if you don't, someone else will.
That's right.
And take that agency to figure out what it is you're passionate about and who you are and what you want to be known for. Again, tapping into what you shared around the subject matter expertise. I think that's such sage advice right now for everybody that you shared, John, is become known for that thing where people are like, oh yeah, John is the personal brand guy. Oh yeah, Michael, he's the understanding values and unity and culture guy. Like, those are the things you need to become known for in your family and your organizations. And so let's all do it. There's a lot of wisdom here today, but as you both know, wisdom's only good, as you both put it, when it gets into your behaviors. And so that's the challenge, leaders, as you heard this today, is you got a lot of good stuff from Michael and John. Now, what are you going to do with it? Let's put it into action. As we get ready to wrap up, let's give the listeners ways that they can maybe get in touch with you or follow you and some of the things that you're doing. Michael, what's the best way for people to follow you, get in touch, or see some of the things that you're up to?
You can go to my LinkedIn, page. It's easy to find me, Michael Sneed, at LinkedIn.
Awesome.
I'm always there. I'm always looking at stuff. So I'm always trying to post things that I find valuable to me and hopefully to others.
Perfect. And John, how about you?
Yeah, same thing. I'm on LinkedIn. I keep my profiles up to date as I can. And similar to Michael, I try to like a lot of things and repost things that I think will be helpful for others.
I love it. And you guys have probably been told this before, but I got to reiterate it. You guys need to do a podcast together. That was really good. Michael and John, thank you both so much for being with us today on the Working Forward podcast. Thank you to those of you who are joining us via the live stream. Pam Brown, I see you sent a couple messages to us there. Thank you for your comments and joining us today. And remember, if you weren't able to join us live today, guess what? You're going to be able to listen to the podcast episode here in just a few weeks or a few months. So thank you for listening that way as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and join us for another stellar conversation the next time that we're back around. We'll see you next time, everybody.